Welcome to the Freak Show, fellow freaks.
I'm Matthew Brockmeyer,
And I'm Christa Carmen,
and this is
Murder Coaster.
Ladies and Gentlemen, welcome back to part 2 of Leonard Lake and Charles Ng. Last week we focused on the life and times of Leonard Lake. Today we will be exploring the life of Charles Ng and the brutal and horrendous crimes these two men committed after joining forces. Please buckle up. Keep your hands and feet in the ride. Every conceivable trigger warning is now in effect. Let the ride commence.
Let's begin. Chapter 1. Little Charlie and Bruce Lee. Charles Cheetah Ng was born December 24th, 1960, in Hong Kong. He had two older sisters, and his father, Kenneth, the owner of a successful electronics store, was ecstatic to finally have a son. He'd actually begged his wife to have one more child, praying for it to be a boy. And when Charlie was born on Christmas Eve, his Christian Methodist father literally considered him a Christmas present from God, thinking he'd been blessed.
Later, Kenneth would think he must have done something horrible in a past life to bring about such a curse as this demon son, Charlie. And after Charlie's horrendous crimes were exposed, Kenneth would supposedly even ask his son to kill himself to try to save the family's honor.
Weak. Kenneth's life had been one of constant struggle and sacrifice. He'd been born in Burma, but the family, nearly starving to death, had moved to Hong Kong when he was a very young child. Kenneth's mother died when he was 7, and he was forced to help raise his brothers and sisters. Then Japan invaded, and as World War II raged, the family was forced to flee to China, returning to Hong Kong after the war, where they opened an electronics store, working tirelessly to make it succeed.
Charlie's parents wanted the best for their children, and that included an education at the finest schools. Charlie's sisters all went to prestigious Hong Kong private schools and then went abroad for college. Alice, the eldest, studying at the University of Alberta in Canada, and Betty studying laboratory science in England.
Charles attended St. Joseph Catholic School, but was a poor student and extremely shy and timid. His workaholic father, who never had the opportunity to go to school, would grow incredibly angry at Charlie's bad grades and lackluster attitude, and as punishment would bind Charlie's wrists and ankles together before beating him with a cane, his wife and daughters often begging him to stop. Kenneth would later lament beating Charlie so, but said he did it because he loved him and wanted him to succeed.
Charlie had a fondness for animals as a small child. He had a pet turtle, but was forced to release it into the wild because it smelled bad and would leave a trail of defecation across the house. He once brought home a stray dog, but his parents said he wasn't allowed to keep it and forced him to turn it loose. And he also raised a chicken up from a tiny little chick, but came home one day to find his mother had butchered and cooked the beloved animal for dinner, which severely traumatized Charlie.
God, that's awful. When he was just 10 years old, he began to steal his mother's underwear and pantyhose and wear them. He also began vandalizing buildings, smashing windows, and starting small fires, all of which would result in severe beatings from Kenneth.
Charlie was obsessed with martial arts film star Bruce Lee. He called him Big Brother Dragon and had a large poster of him on his bedroom wall. Charlie vigorously studied karate and kung fu, and when his parents wouldn't buy him real nunchucks, He made his own out of cardboard and string, practicing for hours on end. He loved mercenary magazines and would go out on missions with his slingshot, smashing car windshields, breaking windows, even learning to make Molotov cocktails, and even throwing the flaming bottles of gasoline at playing children.
That's intense. He'd also seek out the young children of European and American families, stalk them, then jump them and beat them. He was a real problem child, just a bad seed. He sent obscene letters to his female teacher and finally attempted to set the school on fire, which resulted in him being expelled.
Humiliated, his humble and hardworking parents sent him off to England to the Bentham Catholic boarding school. There, he made no attempts to make friends, received mediocre grades at best, and was known as the weird kid who practiced karate all day, and was soon arrested and expelled for stealing money from another student.
He was then shipped off to another Catholic boarding school, this one in the United States, just outside San Francisco, California, where his Aunt Alice was living. It being hoped Aunt Alice could keep an eye on the wayward youth.
But just like in England, Charlie received mediocre grades and made no friends. But he found a new obsession, Chuck Norris. And he'd spend all day reading Soldier of Fortune magazine and convincing himself that he was a great military tactician.
In 1979, at 18, he got his driver's license and immediately got into several car accidents. He'd been a notoriously bad driver his entire life, which often got him in trouble. At one point, he drove his aunt's car into a telephone pole, fled the scene, and when police caught up to him, he ducked into a recruitment center and joined the Marines, telling them he'd been born in Bloomington, Indiana.
He made private first class, was trained as an anti-tank gunner, received high marks in rifle squad tactics and map reading, and in May 1980 was shipped off to Kenaho Bay, Hawaii, all while his parents thought he was still in Catholic boarding school. Eventually, his aunt had to break the news to his parents that Charlie had wrecked her car and then ran off to join the military.
Charlie was proud to be a Marine, part of an elite fighting force, but that didn't stop him from lying, robbing, and stealing. He was caught with stolen hand grenades, but was let off with a slap on the wrist, and then devised a complex plot to rob the armory.
He found another scumbag thief and fellow survivalist named Corporal Christopher Thomas, and in October, while Thomas sat outside keeping watch, Charlie broke into the armory window, stealing 7 .45 caliber pistols, 3 M16 rifles with attached grenade launchers, 3 M60s, a Starlight night scope, and a machine gun. The two then enlisted a few other Marines to haul the loot off and stash it for them.
Of course, when the break-in was noticed, the shit hit the fan. The base was put on full alert. Naval intelligence officers started an investigation, and someone reported they had seen Charlie oiling up a pair of bolt cutters shortly before the break-in.
And Charlie, being a cowardly piece of shit, confessed and ratted everyone he'd involved in his harebrained scheme out. And then, when no one was looking, he jumped out of a window and fled the military base.
He was able to make contact with another survivalist he knew in the weird underground network of criminal military men. The man was Mark Novak, and he was also stationed in Hawaii. Mark said he knew a fellow survivalist living in Northern California that would harbor the fugitive. That man was, of course, Leonard Lake. So Charlie put on a disguise and managed to fly to San Francisco, where he was picked up by the chubby, balding man with a bushy beard named Leonard Lake, who took Charlie out into the redwoods of Northern California to the tiny town of Philo, out near the Mendocino coast.
Chapter 2. Lenny and Charlie.
At 39 years old, Leonard Lake was nearly twice the age of Charles Ng, and became very much a father figure to him. Leonard would tell him stories about the Vietnam War, of the enemy he'd killed and the friends he'd lost, watching in horror as mortar rounds took out his entire platoon. All of this, of course, utter lies, as Leonard had seen no combat during his time in Vietnam, where he'd sat on a base repairing radar equipment.
They were a little family out there in the tiny town of Philo. Leonard, the old wise father figure at 39, his fair maiden Cricket he'd picked up at a Renaissance festival with the aid of the unicorn goat Sir Lancelot, and now their young, weird housemate Charlie. Leonard taught Charlie the basics of survivalism, Northern California style, how to grow a garden, how to sneak around and steal pot plants and rip off hippies. From their base in the Redwoods, they would swoop down into the Bay Area for missions and operations, casing joints, staking out stores, robbing, raping. And here's a question that will be a reoccurring theme throughout this episode. Just how much did Cricket know? And she had to know about all the stolen guns and most likely knew about the gold, over $50,000 worth stolen from pawn shops. And she'd later tell investigators that she did, in fact, know about the rape of prostitutes as well, and that Charlie and Leonard had often bragged to her about their violent escapades.
But all their twisted fun and games, their operations and missions of crime and debauchery, didn't even last 5 whole months before the FBI, Naval Intelligence Service agents, and Mendocino sheriffs were raiding their hideout.
Charlie was sent to the Pearl Harbor Joint Armed Service Confinement Facility in Hawaii. Here, he either slips into delusions or maybe plays crazy. I don't know, probably both. He is interviewed by Major R.D. Glager, whom he tells, "I consider myself a good liar. If you want to kill someone, you make him think you like him. Then it will be easy. They never know who you are. Your best friend is your best enemy." And Charlie claimed to have put potassium cyanide in the salt shaker in the Marine mess hall. He says he tried to blow up a staff sergeant with a hand grenade that failed to detonate. And he claimed that in California he had murdered someone, blown up a house, killed livestock, and firebombed many vehicles. But police could find no record of any of these crimes having committed, and they were dismissed as fantasy. But still, why say them? Maybe he was crazy like a fox, creating bizarre fictional crimes to eclipse the many actual crimes that he had committed.
It's an interesting theory. I kind of like it. And Charlie went to trial at the Marine Corps Air Station at K Bay and pled guilty, saying he had committed the burglary to see if he could do it. His lawyer said,
"Now, granted, it is a serious offense, and he does deserve to be punished, but he's not a dope-smoking, boozing, troublemaking slack-off."
basically saying, well, he may be a dangerous thief, but at least he's not a hippie.
Yeah, that's some defense. But the military panel said Charlie had disgraced the uniform of the 200-year-old fighting force that was spawned by the American Revolution, and Charlie received a dishonorable discharge from the Marines and was ordered to serve 14 years of hard labor.
But what the panel did not know is that in exchange for pleading guilty, Charlie had been guaranteed to serve no more than 3 years, and less for the time already served, making the 14-year sentence moot.
Charlie was sent off to Fort Leavenworth in Kansas, the only maximum security military prison in the country, founded in 1827.
Meanwhile, back in California, Leonard Lake decides he wants to live the life of an outlaw and skips out on his bail, becoming an underground fugitive. Cricket isn't so gung-ho on this life outside of the law and society. It's not what she signed up for. She wanted unicorns and orgies, not living as a fugitive. So she divorces him. But they ostensibly remain a couple, and she continues to make pornographic videos with him, which she then sells through classified ads in sex magazines.
Cricket, cricket, cricket. Oh, so why the divorce? I think she wanted plausible deniability. I think she knew much more than she has ever let on. We'll get into it all later. And the divorce was the ace up her sleeve. Now she could claim she had nothing to do with Leonard's crimes, but still fully be a part of his deviant life. In fact, for a while, the newly divorced couple even experimented with group marriage when Leonard somehow convinced a woman named Rhonda to stay with them at the Wileseyville cabin. Rhonda enjoyed the three-way sex and thought cricket was a lot of fun, but found Leonard to be very weird and didn't like the way he childishly bickered with cricket. And she soon abandoned them.
Leonard really romanticized the notion of a man on the run from the law, saying they'd never catch him alive, and carrying cyanide pills hidden in the seams of his clothing, saying he carried death in his pocket.
The truth was, though he did have a warrant for skipping bail, no one was really looking for him that hard or hunting him down as much as he saw himself a hunted desperado. And far from living on the outskirts of society with other outlaws, he just ended up in his sister Fern's basement and was eating out of his mother's refrigerator.
It was a relatively casual and relaxed life on the run, and if he could just keep his nose clean for 2 years, the statute of limitations would run out and the charges would be dropped.
And this guy, man, he is such a hypocritical piece of shit. It's insane. So you may remember his brother Donald had been receiving disability payments since he was a child and was in a terrible car accident that left him with brain damage. Well, Leonard made amends with his brother and surprised the whole family by taking him out to the country, where Leonard said there was a well-paying job house sitting, and no one ever saw Donald Lake again.
Leonard Lake murdered his own brother so that he could collect his disability payments and take over his identity, using that identity to join an expensive escort service and sex club.
And as if killing his own brother wasn't despicable enough, Leonard Lake now set his sights on his best friend, Charles Gunner, or as he liked to call him, Fat Charles. The killing of his best friend, Leonard would dub Operation Fish, riffing off the many insults Leonard used for his friends, such as beached whale and orca.
For the murders of his brother and best friend, we really only have Leonard's diaries to suss out what happened, and they're written in code. If they didn't involve the tragic death of an innocent man, the diary notes from Operation Fish would be darkly amusing. On April 5th, 1983, Leonard wrote,
Operation Fish failed. Charles is simply too heavy to move. Sigh.
It appears Leonard couldn't coax his friend to the gravesite and was worried if he killed him far away, he wouldn't be able to move the body. But a few days later, Leonard wrote,
I believe I have found an acceptable plan for Fish. A new hole and a wench to move the weight. Also, acid.
And on May 24th, 1984, Leonard Lake wrote in his diary,
Phase 1 of Operation Fish complete. Finally.
When Charles Gunner's body was eventually recovered, there were 2 different guns used and 7 bullets. 3 .22 bullets to the head and 4 .380s to the torso, strongly suggesting 2 shooters.
Many believe the other shooter to be Cricket, and she surely knew about the murder as well. She even joked about it in one of the homemade porno tapes investigators were able to later track down, laughing and stating at least they didn't have to use a chainsaw to cut his friend into pieces. During this time, Cricket was also active recruiting women to pose for Leonard's photography and was well aware he was scouting for victims for his Operation Miranda.
So, after killing his best friend, Charles Gunner, Leonard and Cricket just move on into his house, cashing his welfare checks and become surrogate parents to his 2 children. Just what in the hell? The audacity.
Yeah, they had a yard sale where they sold all of Gunner's belongings, and Leonard just used his yellow Volkswagen as if it was his own.
Eventually, Leonard dumped Gunner's two daughters off on their godfather, George Blank, saying Gunner had run off with a woman and abandoned his children. And then he moved on, this time heading even farther north into the Redwoods, past Sonoma and Mendocino, and now into Humboldt County.
Leonard found 30 acres somewhere between Garberville and Myers Flat. Exactly where I was unable to really figure out. If you happen to know where this guy had land in Humboldt, please email us at murdercoasterpodcast@gmail.com and let us know. And disgustingly, one of the things Leonard liked about Humboldt County was that there was a little town there in the Redwoods called Miranda, which of course is what he called his plan to abduct sex slaves.
In Humboldt, Leonard began stockpiling food, guns, and supplies, and bought a German Shepherd puppy he named Wuban.
Wuban, this appears to be a Nigerian name, though I can find no meaning behind it. Maybe he just named it that because the dog was black and Leonard was a racist piece of shit. I don't know. Oh, yeah, and if we didn't already mention it already, besides being murderous, lying thieves, they were all also racist against black people, including Charles Ng.
These two are the fucking most despicable. Leonard didn't last in Humboldt County too long. During the few months he was there, he began excavating a hillside for the creation of a cell for Operation Miranda, which he excitedly photographed and mailed to Charles Ng in prison in Kansas. But he also seems to have been stealing pot plants and had maybe run afoul of some locals. For one day, he just packed up his shit into Charles Gunner's yellow VW van and bolted down the 101, out to Crickett's cabin, way down in Wileseyville in Calaveras County, well over 300 miles away from Humboldt, and never returned again.
Meanwhile, Charles Ng was serving his time in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, trying to recruit for his so-called Brotherhood of Survivalists. When he talked about robbing federal banks to start a compound deep in the forest, he did attract people. But Charles always managed to make them lose interest when he started talking about wanting sex slaves and detailing all the ways he wanted to torture women, something he spent a lot of time fantasizing about.
In the military, they use rhyming schemes when they march to keep the rhythm. They call these little tunes jodies or cadences. They can be a bit bawdy at times, like the classic Bang Bang Lulu.
Lulu had a boyfriend, he drove a garbage truck. Never got no garbage, cause all he did was bang bang Lulu, Lulu's gone away. Who's gonna bang bang, now Lulu's gone away. My dad was in the Air Force and he would sing those marching songs until the day he died. His favorite one was, you had a good home but you left, you're right. You had a good home but you left, you're right. Sound off. You hear these songs all over, like in the movie Full Metal Jacket. They go around chanting, this is my weapon, this is my gun, this is for fighting, this is for fun. I actually found some really nasty ones on the internet involving sexual assault with a cheese grater. I'm just going to spare you that.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you. Well, Charles was a fan of these crude songs and would often be heard chanting, no gun, no fun, no kill, no thrill, to the point of driving people crazy. He became very well known for constantly chanting the rhymes, as we'll see.
On June 29th, 1984, Charles Ng was released from Fort Leavenworth Military Barracks after serving only 26 months of his 14-year sentence. And he should have been deported back to Hong Kong. His visa had long run out, which is a student visa anyway. He'd been found guilty of several felony crimes. And how he was released back onto the streets of the United States is pretty much unknown and also highly controversial. Perhaps they were still going by the bogus birth certificate he'd given to the Marines. Who knows? But they just let a very, very dangerous man free.
Ing traveled to Oklahoma, first to visit with another survivalist friend he'd met in prison, networking, then was off to San Francisco, where he was picked up at the airport by Cricket, who, again, though having divorced Leonard Lake, still appears neck deep in all of his bullshit.
Leonard again took on the role of father figure and mentor to the young Charles Ing, who was nearly half his age. They would quickly embark on a savage, year-long spree of murder, torture, and rape that would shock the entire world.
Leonard tells Ing that he owes him for taking him in when he was a fugitive, and to pay him back, he has to step up their game to murder.
Just a few blocks from where Leonard was living was a radio DJ named Donald Giletti. Giletti was openly gay and being sexually adventurous. He had placed an ad in the underground San Francisco newspaper reading, quote, blowjob and X video for straight young guys by another young guy in San Francisco. Vince, 626 1581.
Leonard and Charlie cased the house on 153 Henry Street, and Leonard convinced Charlie that the man was rich and the house would be full of money. Then had Charlie call the number and arrange an appointment for oral sex. Charlie was nervous. Despite his bragging, he had never really killed anyone, but he repeated his mantra to himself. No kill, no thrill, no gun, no fun. That's really such a deep piece of writing there that he composed for himself. He steeled himself for the deed, went up to the door, and rang the bell.
I think that it's an old Marine rhyme. I might be wrong, but I feel like no kill, no thrill is just something Marine's saying. He just got stuck on it.
Oh, okay. Maybe it's his
but he does
commitment
make
to
up
saying it like over and over again that's making me question his literary genius there.
Yeah, he always spoke with very stilted English. I don't know. Ugh, these guys are so disgusting. Well, inside the house, unbeknownst to Leonard and Charlie, Giletti had a roommate named Richard Carrazza. And Richard Carrazza ducked into the kitchen to give his roommate privacy when the bell rang. But Carrazza was alarmed to then hear a scuffle, followed by a loud grunt. And when Carrazza stepped into the hall to check on his roommate, he saw a young Asian man going through a chest of drawers. The man raised a long-barreled gun and opened fire, striking Carrazza in the chest before bolting out of the house. Though seriously wounded, Carrazza would live and managed to call police and give a detailed description of the shooter. But sadly, radio DJ Donald Giletti would die.
Charlie was very upset and shook afterwards, considering the operation a failure. Not only had they not made off with any loot, a witness had been left behind. But Leonard just laughed and said not to worry about it, that Asians all look alike and San Francisco was full of them.
Leonard was actually quite pleased with how it all played out. For now, he had an accomplice who would kill on command.
Chapter 3. The Dubs. Harvey Dubs was a 29-year-old artist who worked for a printing firm on Mission Street in San Francisco called Petrov Graphics. He was happily married to his wife, Deborah, and the two had a son named Sean, who was only 16 months old. They were a happy family. Harvey had a side hustle videotaping weddings and parties, and he'd also rent his expensive cameras, video effects, and editing equipment out, advertising his services in the San Francisco Chronicle newspaper.
On Wednesday, July 26, 1984, the entire family disappeared. The last anyone ever heard from Deborah was when she told her friend on the phone that she had to go, that a weird guy had shown up who wanted to rent Harvey's video equipment.
A neighbor noticed a young Asian man leaving the apartment that night with a bulky black duffel bag. This duffel bag was later theorized to have contained Sean Dubs, only 16 months old. Later, this neighbor would see the same Asian man leaving the apartment again, and when she went to talk to him, he ignored her and jumped into a Volkswagen Rabbit driven by a chubby, bearded white man that quickly tore off.
Worried neighbors contacted Deborah's father, who went to the house and found the key still in the door. Realizing something was terribly wrong, the entire family gone, he reported the family missing to the police. Investigators were flummoxed. Items had obviously been taken from the apartment. Dust marks on shelves showed where expensive video editing equipment and VCRs had once been. But who would kidnap an entire family just to steal some video equipment? Didn't make any sense.
Later, the Dubs bank card would be used at an ATM. The video surveillance showing an Asian man with a Greek fisherman's hat pulled down low on his head as he withdrew cash from the machine.
Disgustingly, and it would be said, this is a doozy, folks. Get ready for this. Ugh. Charlie put the head of the year-old baby between his thighs, holding it there as he twisted the body, snapping the neck. And Leonard supposedly encouraged this, saying killing a baby was a good training exercise, making him a soldier, a killing machine, and comparing it to Nazi SS soldiers who were given puppies at the beginning of their training and were forced to kill the dog to graduate as a means of breaking down the walls of empathy and emotion to become a true warrior and soldier beyond good and evil. They then burned the baby's corpse in a large bonfire.
These guys are truly evil, sick. And now Charles Ng would add a new rhyme to his military cadence, the mantra he'd repeat over and over, sometimes going into a trance. No kill, no thrill, no gun, no fun. Daddy die, mommy cry, baby fry.
Chapter 4, The Pink Palace. The corner of Haight and Ashbury in San Francisco has long been the epicenter of the hippie movement. To this day, weirdos and freaks from around the world gather there to celebrate peace, love, flower power, and that groovy LSD.
Down the way a bit from Haight and Ashbury on Carl Street, a block from Golden Gate Park, was a 3-story tenement house known as the Pink Palace, though it wasn't actually pink. The place catered to hippies and musicians, and no one complained about pot smoking or loud music.
Yeah, I actually knew a lot of people from Grateful Dead tour who would hole up in the Pink Palace back in the day. It was a true blue San Francisco flop house, kind of like a beatnik hotel. One of those places where there was often a shared bathroom at the end of the hall. Like if you had a room there with your own bathroom in it, you were like styling out.
Leonard Lake kept a basement apartment there under the name Alan Dre. Here he'd sell the weed he'd steal from the Greenfield Ranch commune and harass women looking for potential victims for Operation Miranda.
The apartment manager would later say about Leonard, he is a really strange dude, but kind of cool, kind of not cool. He likes growing pot, but he's a military type person.
One of the hippie women he hounded for photographs was Marcia McLennan. She finally relented and let him photograph her in her room, but insisted the door be kept open at all times and refused to do any nudes, instead wearing a velvet dress, a hat, and a shawl. She'd later say, quote, I found him weird, friendly, but too friendly, charming, but overly charming. He bothered me a lot. I was repelled by him.
Another Pink Palace resident was beautiful Camera Bower, who was said to be a dead ringer for actress Jamie Lee Curtis. Leonard would constantly ask her to pose for pictures, giving her joints and saying she could have all the weed in the world if she just go on a photo shoot with him out in the country. He claimed to have a big marijuana farm up in Humboldt County, where she could spend the weekend modeling and trimming weed and just have bags and bags of free pot to take back to San Francisco. But he gave her a quote, funny feeling, and she never went anywhere with him.
These people all lived to tell their tales of meeting this charming monster. But others wouldn't be so lucky, like musician Maurice Rock, whose soulful guitar and singing could often be heard echoing through the tenement halls.
Maurice was African American and wore his hair in a big afro, and he loved smoking weed. Couldn't get enough of this stuff. When Leonard told him he'd take him out to his pot farm in the country where they could just pick as much marijuana bud right off the plant as they wanted, which is not the way it works, by the way, the blues musician put on his favorite tan three-piece corduroy suit and left, never to be heard from again. His body would be one of the first discovered buried in the killing fields of Corvallis.
Another musician living in the Pink Palace was Randy Jacobson, a true blue hippie. He'd been drafted as a youth and sent off to Vietnam, where the experience traumatized him. And returning to his home in Georgia, nothing felt right anymore. So he rebelled, grew his hair long, started smoking weed, and decided to hitchhike out to California and be with the flower children. He lived in the Pink Palace on his Social Security disability and became one of Haight Street's many crazy characters.
And of course, Randy wanted to go work on a weed farm, man. Are you kidding, bro? That sounds awesome.
There was also Cheryl Lynn Porter and her roommate, John Lacey. Cheryl worked as a prostitute under the name Okoro, but she hated sex work. When the charming and chubby guy living in the basement asked her if she'd like to come work on his pot farm, she gladly accepted. And sure, her roommate, who was in a wheelchair, could come along too. They left with the man calling himself Alan Dreary, and were never seen again.
Later, when residents of the Pink Palace were questioned about this time period, they all remembered a strange young Asian man who would be lurking around the basement as well. But this man would never talk to anyone and always used the back door. He behaved so suspiciously, one resident wondered if he was squatting there in the basement.
Chapter 5. Ing in the City by the Bay. Charles Ing now went under the name Mike Komodo, an identity he used after Leonard had stolen the man's wallet years earlier, as the guy was surfing.
Leonard stole this wallet when Ing was still in prison in Kansas. So basically, Leonard saw this guy surfing in Watsonville and thought to himself, geez, he looks like my buddy Charlie. I bet Charlie sure would like to steal his identity, and then stole the guy's wallet. What a pal. What a friend. And they say psychopaths don't care about each other.
Oh, geez. Using this alias, Charles Ing worked in Chinatown and rented an apartment. But he soon found better work down by the waterfront and piers on Embarcadero at the Dennis Moving Company on California Street, loading and unloading crates in the warehouse, saying he was an ex-Marine who had been honorably discharged. Often as he worked, hauling crates off of forklifts and stacking boxes, his coworkers would hear him mumbling to himself, repeating the words over and over. No kill, no thrill, no gun, no fun. Daddy die, mommy cry, baby fry.
Yeah, man, it started getting on all their nerves and creeping them out. And then someone even hung up a crude sketch of an Asian man and scrawled no kill, no thrill around it. And I guess apparently all his workers there thought it was hilarious.
Meanwhile, Leonard Lake sat down at his typewriter and began to pound the keys, typing out,
I have learned that my programming in youth, that which is called morality, either was not given or was given poorly. To all purposes save a very few, I have no morality. Accept it as fact. In terms of life or death, Neither seems to move me. The past 2 months saw Miranda come to fruit. That taught me more. The perfect woman is one who is totally controlled. A woman who does exactly what she is told and nothing else. There are no sexual problems with a totally submissive woman. There are no frustrations. There is only pleasure and contentment.
On Halloween 1984, Leonard Lake noticed an ad in the San Francisco Chronicle for a 1980 Honda Prelude for sale by a guy named Paul Costner. This is the car Charles Ng would later be seen putting a stolen vice into the trunk of. The car that was found to have a bullet hole and blood splatter on the ceiling.
Now, you want to hear, like, this is such craziest of, like, coincidences. So this guy, Paul, who's got the car for sale, his sister, her name is Sharon, and she actually became instrumental to this case because she just wouldn't let his disappearance go. She hounded the police, and she was a hero in this story. Well, this is insane. She once went to the circus and posed for a photograph with a unicorn goat named Sir Lancelot.
Oh, snap!
Isn't that crazy? Sir Lancelot makes his triumphant return.
I, for one, am glad to see him show up again. He's the only wholesome part of this tale.
I guess he's wholesome.
Yeah, and wholesome is like a stretch. On November 2nd, Lake made a journal entry.
Met Charlie. Performed op. Met resistance for the first time. Unsuccessful in obtaining credit cards or band codes. Drove to country for completion. Canceled Charlie's running debt to me. I mean, that entry is basically saying that they stole the car and the guy wouldn't give him his credit card numbers, so Charlie shot him for the debt. Like, I mean, there's no way around it.
Yeah, jeez. Ng continued to work at the moving company, making some friends, getting used to the daily grind, assimilating, bonding. Friends like Clifford Parento.
But one day, Clifford, he just went missing. Plain disappeared. Weird how that happens.
Yeah, it's like, you know that thing where like you're always the common denominator? It's kind of, I wonder if they, Leonard Lake would later sell Clifford's motorcycle to a guy out in Calaveras.
And then another coworker named Jeffrey Gerald went missing. This guy was a rock and roller with bleached blonde hair, and he played drums in a band called Thrash and Burn. And him and Charlie bonded over their love of the football team, the 49ers. And Jeffrey agreed to help Ng with a side moving project. Just disappeared. His car later would be seen posted for sale by Charles Gunner. Yup, old fat Charles. Leonard was still using his alias.
Many of their victims' belongings would be sold at various flea markets throughout Northern California, sometimes right out on the side of the road, garage sale style.
And Leonard had been hard at work on his fallout shelter / sex slave prison. He had it all furnished, ready to go. Now he just needed a woman to put inside of it.
Chapter 6, Kathy and Mike. Kathleen Elizabeth Allen was 18 and happily in love. She'd recently moved in with her boyfriend, Michael Carroll. Kathy worked full-time in the Safeway in Milpitas, situated right in Silicon Valley, and Michael worked at a local pizza restaurant.
Michael was trying to get his shit together after having been incarcerated. He'd been in the Marines and he'd gotten busted with a bunch of hash and ended up doing time at Leavenworth Prison in Kansas. Although he was trying to stay clear of trouble, he still kept in touch with some of the underground military criminals he had met there in prison, including an Asian guy named Charlie that he'd done time with, who'd recently called saying they should hook up and talk over some potential operations.
It was all very mysterious. The man would call, and when Kathleen asked who it was, he'd simply say,
Tell Mike it's his friend from San Francisco.
Mike would leave and return with cash in his pocket. When Kathy would ask what he had done, he'd simply say to her,
Relax, babe. It's no big deal. Don't worry your pretty little head about it.
But then he left and hadn't come back, hadn't called or anything, which was very unlike him.
The next day, Kathleen was working at Safeway when she was told she had a phone call. The caller claimed Mike was in Lake Tahoe and had been badly hurt, could possibly be dying, and that Kathy needed to come and help him immediately.
It was her worst fear. Mike had gotten himself in some sort of bad trouble. Maybe that's why she didn't call the cops and accepted the ride from the mysterious stranger who offered to pick her up and take her to Tahoe.
But the chubby, bearded man in the copper-colored Honda didn't take Kathleen to Tahoe. Instead, she was taken to Corvallis County in the Sierra Nevada foothills, driven down a dirt road, past a locked gate, into a cabin perched on a hillside of pines and black oaks. There, they were greeted by an Asian man with a gun who handcuffed Kathy and told her Mike was dead. She was marched into the cabin, sat down in a chair with a bright photographic light aimed at her, a video camera on a tripod, recording everything.
In the video, she looks numb, shocked, almost in a state of disbelief. Leonard says to her from behind the camera,
Mike owes us. He can't pay. Now we're going to give you a choice, Kathy. This is probably the last choice you're going to make. You can come along with us, you can cooperate, you can do everything we tell you to, willingly, and in approximately 30 days, if you want a date to write on your calendar, the 15th of May, we'll either drug you, blindfold you, or in some way or other make sure you don't know where you are and where you're going, and take you back to the city and let you go. And what you say at the time, I don't care. My name, you don't know. His name is Charlie, but screw it. You don't know where you are. What you say, hopefully, can't hurt us. By then, hopefully, Mike will have disappeared gracefully. If you don't cooperate with us, if you don't agree this evening, we'll probably put a round in your head and take you out and bury you in the same area that we buried Mike. While you're here, we'll keep you busy. You'll wash for us, you'll clean for us, cook for us, you'll fuck for us. That's your choice in a nutshell. It's not much of a choice unless you got a death wish.
No, I don't.
The fairness of what we're doing is not up for debate. We're not worried about whether we're fair or whether we're good. We're just worried about ourselves. Selfish bastards? Maybe. You'll probably think of worse names for us in the next few weeks. If you go along with us, we'll be as nice as we can to you within the limits of keeping you prisoner. If you don't go along with us, we'll probably take you into the bed, tie you down, rape you, shoot you, and bury you. Time's up. Make your choice.
I guess I have to be available.
Spell it out. On tape. I want to hear it from your own lips.
I can't spell it out. I'll go along with whatever you want.
That's all we wanted to hear. Mike was an ass. Undressed for us. Let's see what we bought.
Undress for you?
Take your blouse off and your bra.
Excuse me for being shy.
I can understand, but don't be shy. You're going to take a shower.
Charlie then chimed in.
This won't be the first time, it won't be the last time. Oh, don't make it hard for her, Charlie. Kathy, keep undressing, please. Panties, too. I don't want to have to make an example of you, of what we need to do to make you cooperate.
I realize that.
Then please cooperate.
Here, the image goes out. When the video starts again, Kathy is topless and massaging Charlie's back as he rubs his legs against her.
For days, Leonard and Charlie kept Kathy as their sex slave, keeping her locked up in the bunker when they weren't using her. The videos of this are just horrendous to see. She's really pretty. She looks exactly like Aubrey Plaza, who I love. It's one of my favorite actresses. Charlie insisted she wear nothing but a pair of pantyhose with the crotch ripped out, which was some kind of turn on for him.
On her third night in the cell, Kathy began trying to free herself, slamming her shoulder into the door. Though she'd bent the hinges, the door itself would not give. When Leonard saw the bent hinges, he took her and strapped her spread eagle to the bed and again turned on the video camera.
As the tape whirled, Leonard told Kathy how upset he was that she damaged the hinges on the cell door, asking her what he had to do to convince her to obey him.
Are you asking if you can hit me?
No, I'm not asking if I can hit you, Kathy. I can very much hit you, very easily. I don't want to hit you. Erotically, it would turn me on. I would get a great thrill out of it, but let's say I'm still trying to keep a little bit of your sanity, okay? I'm having a little war within myself between what I want to do and what I think I should do, and what we might call is the decent thing to do.
Leonard then untied her and gave her a skimpy blue nightie to put on, photographing her as she did, saying,
I know you are not trying to do anything foolish like smile, but you have such a pretty face that even when you're not smiling, you have a sultry look about you that the guys would find very attractive.
Leonard then told her she could have a cigarette and turned off the camera. Later, Charlie would tell people that he casually cooked and ate rice, watching as Leonard whipped her and sexually assaulted her.
Oh man, this case. Chapter 7. The Bonds. It turns out secluded backwoods California draws some very interesting characters, as Leonard and Charles found themselves with some new neighbors at Crickett's cabin in Calaveras County.
Brenda O'Connor was from Michigan, but at 18 had come out to San Diego following her older sister, and the two had fallen for the Bond brothers, Lonnie and Art. Brenda was soon pregnant by Lonnie, and they had a son named Lonnie Jr.
So Lonnie Bond seems like an interesting character. He had a deformed hand, and he was only 5'4", but he was said to have a heart of gold and was always there for a friend. And he had dreams and high hopes too. He wanted to start a methamphetamine lab in the hills. He dreamed of one day being, quote, the Crystal King of California. So with Brenda and his infant son, Lonnie Jr., they moved out to the remote hills of Calaveras County where he could start cooking crank.
This is back in 1984, so he was a true pioneer.
Long before Breaking Bad. True crime books are always funny and interesting because, like, in No Kill, No Thrill, they describe Lonnie as just being a nice guy. He's always there for everyone. He's loved. And then just 2 pages later, they're like, he was a dangerous drug dealer that was wanted dead by unsavory characters. It's funny because you have to make the victims look good, but I don't know. It's just life when you're trying to be the Crystal King of California, I suppose.
But the neighbors, a chubby, balding guy and his young Asian friend, were creepy as hell. They were constantly shooting off guns and would get irate if the gate they shared ever got left open.
Yeah, but locked gates and guns are all part of being the Crystal King of California, and Lonnie had even bought guns off the strange neighbors who warned him of an coming nuclear apocalypse. Brenda's friend Scott, whose full name was Robin Scott Stapley, had come up for a visit, looking to camp out there in the hills and lose himself in the great outdoors. Scott was a tall redhead who was trained in martial arts and had actually founded a chapter of the Guardian Angels in San Diego. Do you remember those guys, like the red berets and the red jackets out protecting the streets?
Vaguely, I do. I don't think I can't remember the last time I heard mention of them.
I know, right? I looked it up on the internet. They're still around. And I guess they even have a cyber angels now, where they protect people on the internet somehow. I don't know.
No shit. The neighbor had seemed cool enough at first. The chubby balding guy had sold Scott a 9mm Walther PPK-S handgun that he loved. But the guy had become obsessed with Lonnie's fiancée, Brenda. He openly and unabashedly flirted with the 18-year-old new mother, practically begging her to pose for photographs for him, which she refused. He began stalking her, breaking into their house when they went to town. He creeped her out terribly, and she hated him, started referring to him as fuckface. And there was the weird Asian man. He never said anything, just lurked in the shadows. One night, Brenda was certain, as she'd gazed between the tall pines separating their property, that she'd seen them out behind their cabin, lit by floodlights, with a body in a wheelbarrow, dumping it in a ditch.
But now the strange neighbor was coming over and apologizing, saying he was sorry things had gotten weird, and he was asking them to come over for dinner as a peace offering. Brenda didn't want to go, but reluctantly agreed, saying she had to run to town first for some supplies.
Brenda returned home from town to an empty house, expecting to hear the cry of her baby, thinking maybe they'd all gone on a stroll through the woods.
As she went to set her groceries on the counter, the door flung open and Leonard Lake and Charles Ng came crashing into the room, grabbing her as she screamed and struggled, her groceries scattering about the floor. They slapped handcuffs on her wrists and dragged her out of the cabin and through the forest.
The two men took Brenda O'Connor into the cabin and sat her in an armchair, hands cuffed behind her back, turning on a powerful photography lamp. Across from her was a video camera set up on a tripod.
Leonard Lake hit record on the camera as Brenda shouted at them.
"What have you done to Lonnie?"
"If you must know, I didn't do anything with him."
"What did he do to him then?"
"I didn't do anything."
"Did you guys kill him?"
"No, he didn't kill him."
"Are you going to let us go soon?"
"Probably not."
"Never? Are you going to kill us?"
"That's up to you, Brenda."
"Why are you doing this?"
"Because we hate you."
"What did we do?"
"Shut up. What a hairy day. Your baby is sleeping like a rock. Brenda, the whole neighborhood doesn't like you. The neighborhood doesn't like Lonnie, and we haven't liked you since you moved in."
"So we'll leave."
"Oh, you have already left. We've closed you down. The Star Root Gang, if you want to call it that. We got together and we took you away. We took Scott away. Lonnie's going to earn a decent living for the rest of his life, hopefully. Your baby is going to be taken away." Whew, excuse the heavy breathing.
"Be taken away?"
"There's a family down in Fresno that doesn't have a baby.
"You're taking my baby away?"
They've got one now. It's better than the baby's dead, right?"
"What do you mean they've got one now? That's my baby."
"Brenda, you have a choice. You can cooperate with us. By cooperating with us, that means you will stay here as our prisoner. You will work for us, you will wash for us, you will fuck for us. Or you can say, no, I don't want to do that. In which case, we'll tie you to the bed, we'll rape you, and then we'll take you outside and shoot you. Your choice."
I'll cooperate.
That's nice. Oh, that was fast.
Are you going to take my baby away from me?
Personally, I don't think you're a fit mother.
Where's Lonnie now?
They've been taken away. There's a place up in the hills where they will have to split wood for the rest of their happy lives.
You haven't killed them or anything.
No, I haven't killed them. If they do die, that's their problem. To be honest, I couldn't care less. They had better cooperate too. They are getting the same choice you are getting. For all I know, they could be dead now.
Is that why you invited us for dinner?
Uh-huh. It's all part of the game. You've been an asshole. Like, I can't believe. You've been so damn rude. And for no reason that I can figure.
Because I can't stand it up here. It's the middle of nowhere. Are you going to keep me up here the rest of my life or something?
To be honest with you, I probably won't keep you here more than a few weeks. But after that, I'll probably pass you around.
The light's hot.
Suffer.
Why do you guys do this?
We don't like you. Would you like me to put it in writing?
I can't take much more of this.
We're going to sit back and enjoy ourselves. It's been a hectic day, and you are going to learn the true meaning of fuckface.
Charlie then walked up to Brenda, flicked open a butterfly knife, and began to hack her shirt off, saying,
"Since you say it's hot, I will take it off for you." Charlie then pulled off his own t-shirt, grabbed a pair of leg irons, dangling them before Brenda for a moment, before shackling her ankles with a loud clank, a sound she later fantasized about in prison.
Would you please go get my baby? You can't keep my baby from me.
We're taking your baby because your baby is innocent in this.
Well, so am I.
Ha! Ha! The point is, you haven't been particularly innocent while you've been here, Brenda. In fact, you've been something of a first-class asshole. However, we're going to give you an opportunity to make up for it.
Charlie then slid the butterfly knife under her bra straps and said,
Let's see what we're buying.
Don't cut my bra off.
Nothing is yours. It will be totally ours. You can cry and stuff like the rest of them, but it won't do you no good. We are pretty cold-hearted, so to speak.
Leonard then began to speak.
Charlie here owes me one, so I get you first. But he's got his heart on taking a shower with you. Who am I to turn him down? You better believe us, Brenda, or you'll be dead.
I believe you. I'll do anything you want. Just give my baby to me. He can't live without me.
He's gonna learn. Stand up, jeans off, panties off, and everything else. Watch he doesn't fall over in the shower and split her head.
I don't need a shower.
Yes, you do. We have to make sure you're clean. That's the house rule. Traditional. Make sure she brushes her teeth and uses mouthwash.
At that point, the video ends. It would later be revealed that while Brenda was at the store, Leonard and Charlie had ambushed Lonnie and Scott while they were sleeping.
It had taken several shots to bring Scott down. He's a guardian angel, after all. He awoke swinging, and then took a shot to the leg and another to the shoulder as he fought. But then he was hit twice in the head, one execution style, which ended his life.
Leonard, somehow convinced that Lonnie had buried treasure in a mine shaft, tried unsuccessfully to get Lonnie to tell him where he'd buried his loot. But when Lonnie told him he didn't know what he was talking about, Leonard grew frustrated and shot him in the head as well.
Leonard then handed Charlie a hammer. told him to kill the crying infant in the other room, again telling him it would make him strong, make him a warrior. Charles Cheetah Ing took the hammer, went into the back room of that cabin in the Sierra Nevada foothills, and beat the baby in the head right there in its crib until it stopped crying, splattering the walls with blood, bone, and brain.
Chapter 8. Busted.
Whenever Leonard and Charlie visited Cricket at her South San Francisco apartment on Peck's Lane, they liked to stop by the South City Lumber and Supply Company and rip them off for materials for their bunker and sex slave prison. Leonard would engage the salespeople in conversation while Charlie would creep around pocketing items. But on June 2nd, 1985, things did not go as planned. For Reserve Police Officer John Callis was there watching as Charlie walked out of the store with a large gray bench vise.
When Charlie realized he'd been followed from the store, he dropped the stolen vise in the trunk of the Honda beside a box of pornography and a six-pack of Dr. Pepper. And as the reserve police officer called out that he wanted to talk to him, quickly strode out of the parking lot and onto the crowded sidewalk.
He walked around the block, then doubled back to see police cars in the parking lot and Leonard in handcuffs. He then rushed to a payphone and called Cricket. Cricket drove over and scooped Charlie up, the two slowly cruising by the hardware store again. Charlie crouched down on the floorboards as Cricket surveyed the scene.
Cricket then drove Charlie back to his apartment, circling the block, first looking for cops. When they were sure there were no police there, Cricket let him out up the block so he could creep through the shadows unseen.
Police called Cricket on the phone, telling her Leonard was now on life support in the ICU after ingesting cyanide, and asking her if she knew where his accomplice, Charles Ing, was. Cricket said, she had no idea where he could be, then hung up and immediately called Charlie on the phone, warning him that the cops were now looking for him.
Charlie hastily packed a bag with his .22 Ruger, a set of handcuffs, a camera, and a towel, then darted out the door, hopped on the Bay Area Rapid Transit train, and went to his Aunt Alice's house. His aunt gave him $400 and took him to the San Francisco International Airport, where he caught a flight to Chicago using the Mike Komodo alias.
When police searched Charlie's apartment, they found mounds of evidence. There was ammunition, pistol grips, and other firearms. There was a credit card issued to Lonnie Bond and a set of cross pens engraved with the initials of Clifford Paranto. There was a map of San Francisco, an address on Yukon Street circled in red ink. The address was the home of the Dubs family. And they found dozens of videotapes. On one was the classic porn film Taboo. And when police rewound it, they saw a bizarre image flicker on the screen. It was a blue wheelbarrow with two bodies in it.
The killers had videotaped themselves burying bodies, then taped over the footage with pornography, and now the image could only be seen when the tape was being rewound. It was quite miraculous that investigators even noticed the image.
And you can see this image online. It's extremely disturbing as the bodies wrapped in sleeping bags have rigor mortis real bad. And so the limbs are just sticking out of the wheelbarrow, all stiff. And on another videotape, they found another image, also impossible to see unless the movie was being rewound. It was just a split-second glimpse of missing teenager Kathy Allen.
And the bodies just kept churning up in Corvallis. Weeks after the initial search, investigators discovered the bodies of Lonnie and Scott when coyotes began to dig up their graves. Remains would continue to turn up in the area for years. Investigators would theorize that at least 25 bodies had been disposed of in the area, including another baby that wasn't Lonnie Jr. or the Dubs child, and has never been identified.
The investigation revealed Cricket had used the Dubs credit card in restaurants on at least 2 occasions, and a search of her house turned up some of Kathy Allen's jewelry. The Corvallis County Sheriff publicly stated he considered her a suspect.
Cricket told investigators Leonard had told her what the true purpose of the bunker was, but she hadn't wanted to think about those things. How much she knew and how involved she was, we'll never know. But law enforcement would eventually offer her complete immunity for her cooperation, which she gave, telling them to dig under the chicken shack where they found the body of Randy Jacobson.
Charlie, meanwhile, in Chicago, asked a San Francisco gun shop to mail him a machine gun he dropped off for repairs. They refused to send it to a private address. Charlie then headed to Detroit, Michigan, where he stayed with another friend from the underground criminal military circuit, then crossed the bridge over into Canada, where he knew they didn't extradite fugitives facing the death penalty. And then taking a bus from Ontario to Toronto, and then on into Calgary. He was now wanted by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Interpol, and the FBI.
Calgary has a very large Asian population where Charlie hoped to blend in, but he was now down to just $10. He went into a small wooded valley where he constructed a wooden lean-to to sleep in, that was eventually discovered by a group of children playing in the forest. Ing simply saying to them,
"I am tired."
On Saturday, July 6th, Charlie went to the Hudson Bay Company department store in downtown Calgary, where he was seen by security guards slipping cans of salmon and soup, a bottle of Pepsi, and a bag of sugar into his blue backpack, and then walking out the door.
Security guards followed him out, then informed him he was under arrest for shoplifting. They seized the backpack and escorted him back into the store. As they shuffled him towards a back room, Charlie reached into a fanny pack, saying he was getting his wallet, and instead jerked out a .22 caliber pistol, and chaos ensued.
One security guard put him in a chokehold, while the other attempted to grab the gun, and they all fell to the ground in the busy department store, struggling for the pistol, Charlie biting their hands as they attempted to pull the gun from his grip. During the melee, Charlie managed to squeeze off 2 shots, one of which hit a security guard's hand.
But then Calgary police arrived and were able to subdue Ing and retrieve the gun. Amidst the chaos, a crowd had formed around the scene and began to clap and cheer, thinking it was all part of a large Wild West rodeo that was going on called the Calgary Stampede. And during the skirmish, Charlie had managed to shit his pants.
A search of Charles Ing would reveal 2 pistol clips with 9 rounds in each, a wallet containing $10, a set of handcuffs, gloves, a ski mask, a knife, and a pouch containing 50 loose rounds of ammunition. Scary.
Charlie was taken to the local jail, where, when he was left alone, he stripped naked and was discovered attempting to hang himself with his soiled underwear. I'd say that's rock bottom there. Trying to hang yourself with shit-covered underwear in a Canadian jail cell.
Yeah, man, good grief. Charlie was convicted of armed robbery, aggravated assault, and unlawful use of a firearm, but it was found not guilty of attempted murder. He was sentenced to 4.5 years, 17 months of which was mandatory, before he was eligible for parole, meaning California authorities would have to wait for over a year to even begin the extradition process.
And in California, the charges against Charlie were adding up quickly, now including 9 murders.
Charlie was sent to Edmonton Maximum Security Prison, where he was kept in protective custody, locked in a cell at the end of a dimly lit corridor. He was served meals through a slot in the door and allowed to shower once a week. For 1 hour every day, he was allowed outside into a mesh-encased 20-foot cubicle for exercise, where he'd practice karate while mumbling his chant of,
No kill, no thrill, no gun, no fun. Daddy die, mama cry, baby fry.
But soon Charlie had a neighbor, a criminal named Maurice Labarge, who went by Mo. He and Charlie would send notes back and forth and exercise together. Charlie bragged of his exploits and would make cartoons showing the fun and games he and Leonard Lake had.
These cartoons are horrendous and absolutely disgusting. Images of Leonard Lake teaching Charlie how to kill babies, labeled Lake's Baby Dies School. Images of Leonard beating a bound and naked Kathleen Allen with a whip in front of a video camera, while Charlie happily watched, eating rice. He bragged about how he'd never get extradited to California, where he'd have to face the death penalty, and said instead he'd just murder a prison guard in Canada so he'd never have to leave, even drawing pictures of himself as an old man being brought to California.
Charlie told Mo that killing the first baby had been difficult, but he'd gotten used to it, and how executing Debbie Dubs had given him an erection, and he'd kept her panties as a souvenir, chuckling as he said, "Daddy dies, mama cries, baby fries."
He claimed he'd cut the clitoris off one of his victims and chainsaw the testicles off another, and practiced with his throwing stars on another. He said he'd poured acid in victims' eyes. He talked about the funeral pyres they built to burn the bodies, how the complex were the layers of wood splashed with gasoline, and how the burning bodies smelled like pork and made his mouth water. He told him how in the morning they go through the ashes with a spade, collecting any remaining bits of bone in a bucket, and then spreading them throughout the forest.
Charlie also claimed there was a videotape of Leonard and Cricket having sex on top of dead bodies, as well as one of him torturing a woman with a pair of pliers. Man, kind of irks me that Cricket got full immunity because she seems way involved.
Dude, what the fuck?
He claimed some bodies had been buried 10 feet deep out in the forest and would never be found.
Mo would later say that when he talked of killing, Charlie's eyes would light up, his body would vibrate, and his mouth would visibly salivate.
While his neighbor, Mo, in the cell next to him, engaged Charlie and got him talking about his heinous crimes, secretly Mo was disgusted by it all and was saving every drawing Charlie gave him, giving them to his lawyer with the hopes that they might one day get him out of jail, or at least out of maximum security. Eventually, there were over 200 of the crude sketches depicting rape, torture, murder, and mutilation.
This guy, Mo, that was in the cell next to him, he was a real character. He's a really wild guy. We could actually do an entire podcast just on this guy, but let's just start bringing this disgusting story to a close here.
As Charlie's extradition hearing grew closer, groundswell had sprung up in Canada to have Charlie sent to California to stand trial, regardless of the death penalty, headed by an organization called Victims of Violence, which brought the families of the dead onto television and radio to be interviewed and tell their harrowing tales.
There was one extradition hearing after another as the case worked its way through various appeals. And even the White House was involved, with Vice President George Bush asking to be personally briefed on the details. At one point, it was suggested Canada might be forced to deport Charlie to Hong Kong if the United States refused to waive the death penalty. And United States officials stated that they would consider a mid-air interception to ever prevent Charlie from reaching Hong Kong. How fucking crazy is that?
Oh my God.
The United States and Canada are going to go to war over this asshole.
Finally, on February 21st, 1991, more than 5 years after Charlie had been arrested in Calgary, the Canadian Supreme Court took up the case. Outside the courthouse steps, the victims of violence unfurled a petition with 100,000 signatures demanding Charlie be extradited to the United States, while Amnesty International was there protesting the extradition. And after a 5-month-long Supreme Court case, a ruling of 4-3 determined Charlie was to be sent to trial in the United States.
Check this out. This is crazy. So the decision that he should be tried in the United States came at 8 o'clock in the morning. The penitentiary where he was being held was notified at 8:20, and United States Marshals were there immediately, go to his cell and take him away. And Charlie, he's in there and he's like, I'm not going anywhere unless I talk to my lawyer. I want to talk to my lawyer. And the United States Marshals, they took him. There was no talking to your lawyer. And by 8:40, they were dragging him on board the airplane. By 8:50, they were in the air on their way to California, less than an hour after the decision had been made.
Wow, that's impressive. That's the fastest you ever see anything move. Charlie's stay had cost Canadian taxpayers millions of dollars, and newspapers ran headlines saying, "Good riddance."
But an appeal was made to the United Nations Human Rights Commission, who eventually ruled Canada had ignored its obligations under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights.
But it was too late. Charlie was in the United States of America, and they weren't going to let him go.
Now, for me personally, I know this is a touchy subject, and we don't really get into politics, but I don't personally believe in the death penalty, mainly because just so many innocent people end up on death row, and that's a fact. And sadly, many innocent people have actually been executed. The death penalty is also really expensive. And honestly, it puts the victims' families through trauma. Like every time the case is appealed, and then it's appealed again, they have to live through it all over and over and over. In my personal opinion, just let them rot in prison, be forgotten. But if anyone deserves the death penalty, if anyone deserves to die for the heinous and brutal inhumanity, it's this baby-killing piece of fucking shit. God, totally unremorseful, rapist, torturer, with absolutely no feelings for anyone. Ugh.
Hear, hear. The case in California dragged on and on for nearly a decade and cost approximately $20 million. Twice the amount of the OJ trial, which happened during the same time period.
Yeah, he figured out this way of worming the system by like constantly firing and rehiring lawyers, just trying to make the trial last forever. And people were surprised at how efficient he was in getting the trial to just go on and on and on. But eventually, in February 1999, Charles Ng was convicted of 11 homicides, including 2 infants. He was sentenced to death. But Charlie had the last laugh because Gavin Newsom put a moratorium on the death penalty. And now Charlie Cheetah Ng sits in San Quentin on death row. He is 64 years old.
I mean,
you get the last line.
Justice in a sense, but it kind of makes you wish that he'd succeeded in killing himself with his soiled underwear.
Yeah. Spare a lot of money and a lot of bullshit.
Well, that, dear listeners, is the story of Leonard Lake and Charles Ng. Interested to hear what everyone has to say on this one. It's pretty brutal.
It's one of the most heinous cases in all of true crime, honestly. It's so fucking gnarly.
There are some parallels with... Oh, God, you're going to have to edit this, but what is the guy we just recently did that had the murder...
Yeah, we've been doing sex slaves like crazy for some reason. I don't know why.
Guy that had this,
there was, the slave master, John Robinson.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah. And then there was also that fucking toy box motherfucker.
That's who I was thinking of. What's the toy box killer's name?
Ray Parker? Parker
Yes.
Ray. David Ray Parker. David Parker. He changed his name a lot. His mother's maiden name was Parker, so he would go by David Parker. But his real name is David Parker Ray.
Yeah, these guys, man. And I gotta tell you, for what it's worth, like, it's that time of year, at least where I live in Rhode Island on the East Coast, where, like, I walk my dog every day and I run a couple times a week, and it's like, we've been doing, like, I've been wondering why, even more so, I'm on high alert for this, but then we're doing all these stories, right? I give landscaping trucks the widest goddamn berth ever, because I'm like, you'll be goddamned if you're getting me in the back of that windowless box attached to your moving vehicle. Like, frickin' got these murder boxes on the brain. Good grief.
Well, it's like in Silence of the Lambs. What is he? He's like,
Yeah.
you're looking to be about a 32.
Yeah.
What?
Those are in the back of the newest Stephen King book too. What is it? The
dark.
Holly.
You like it dark?
No, the Holly that came out recently. That had a interesting premise too, with an
I
elderly
think he's got
couple.
another one out already.
Oh, I haven't read
You
that
like
one
it
yet.
dark? Yeah.
But
Can't
yeah,
slow that
the
fucker down.
serial killers that disarm their victims by, like, convincing them they need help to get into their truck, into their van. Vans, man.
Ted Bundy,
Creepy.
man, that was his MO.
Mm-hmm.
He would put his hand in a cast and then use the cast to bash him in the head with.
Ugh, goodness. Well, yeah, and Charles Ng is still sitting there, like,
I'm like not pro death penalty, like I said, but like it pisses me off that he was like constantly conniving how to get out of the death penalty, bragging that they would never kill him. And if you look at pictures of him, like the most recent picture of him, I mean, I know I'm just like projecting, but he has got the fucking worst smile, the smuggest look on his fucking face. I just want to punch. The picture where his hair's all gray and he's like smiling at the camera, like, you fucking piece of garbage. Oh, I hate him.
Yeah. Well, on that note, man, right? We want to hear from you, right? What do we want to tell you? Hit people with our email address, Matt. Come on.
I want to thank, God, what is this guy? What was his name again?
Oh, the person that I got it right here. Oh, I thought I did. Yeah, who?
David
asked for
Barnes.
this?
I got it.
Okay.
And I want to thank David Barnes again for listening and requesting this. Thanks so much. And do you have something you would like us to cover? Let us know. And if we got something wrong you want to let us know about, we would love to hear it. We're not always right. And if you just want to say hi, just drop us a line at murdercoasterpodcast@gmail.com. That's murdercoasterpodcast@gmail.com. Oh, and if you've got a band and you want us to play your music at the end while we talk, hit us up too. All right, we'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Later.